Hello, my name is Corey Williams. You know what my favorite season of the year is? It's fall. And you know why it's fall? Is it because of the bright colors landscape, the great food, or the great holidays it brings? You know what my greatest holiday is? It's Halloween. Is it because of the candy, or the costumes you buy at stores, or the horror movies you see on TV, or the great stories you hear at night and alone in your bed? And when you think of horror stories, no other name comes to mind than Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe was a critic, a publisher at his times, and an author as we know him today. He was never had a fairy tale life, and in this presentation I'm going to show you a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe's life, some of his stories you may have read, and also his tragic and fatal death that left him lonely in the streets of Baltimore. Poe's early life, like I said, was never a fairy tale. It wasn't full of flowers or happy memories. It was always filled with, as you see in his stories, death. At the age of 3, his mother died from tuberculosis, or coughing of the lungs, blood would spew out. And he saw this. This was the only memory of Poe, or Poe's mom, as you can say. But after this, after his mother died, his father actually left him astray, where he was adopted by the Allen family. The Allen family never really wanted to adopt Poe. He was always like the closet child you see like in Harry Potter. The Allens really wanted Poe to run the family business, but Poe never really wanted this. He just wanted to be a writer, as the writer we know as him today. So Allen actually wanted to change this, and you'd see this later on in his life as he attends college. While Poe was in college, Poe's stepfather, Allen, gave him little to no money as he attended there. He gave him just as much money to pay for his classes. No money for room or board, no money for clothes, no money for anything else. So Poe had a really hard time finding odd jobs here and there to make times go through. And definitely in the winter, because when the winter came, he actually had to burn his clothes and the furniture he had in his room to keep warm. Allen really didn't care for Poe, because even when he knew all this stuff was going on, he pleaded with Allen to give him some money, but Allen wrote him off like he was nothing. He wrote him off so much that he actually didn't even tell him about his stepmother's death. And it wrote him off so much that he actually didn't even attend to his mother's funeral because he didn't let him know about it. And even at Allen's deathbed, after all this stuff of raising Poe and giving him an actual life, to give him one glimpse of hope, Allen didn't give Poe anything in his will. But to every sad story comes a glimpsing of light, and that's what brings us to the next chapter of his life, where Poe meets his lovely cousin that he falls in love with, Virginia. Virginia was actually Poe's first cousin, and they met after Poe returning from school. He was loving his new life, his new love, Virginia, where he married at the age of 13. And this gave Poe time to realize what he really needed to do with his life, become a writer, a critic, and a good publisher of his times. And in this, his love brought his new work, and the work that we see today. After he fell in love with Virginia, he started writing. And one of the writings you might have heard of before of him talking about is the Masquerade of the Red Death. The Red Death was just as he saw it as a child. Tuberculosis. The Red Death would come to the countryside, kill its victims, with blood running down its victims' necks and face. But there was actually a king in this countryside that took all his noble friends up and locked them away in the castle to try to capture the Red Deaths and wouldn't allow them into the castle. But this never stopped the Red Death from entering. Like a thief in the night, the Red Death came and killed everyone off in the castle. The next story that you might have heard of before is the most popular one ever, is the Raven. The Raven describes as a man sitting in his library thinking about his lost love, Lenore. As he was sitting there pondering on his lost love in the Raven, he heard a tapping at his door. But nothing was there, nothing more. Then he heard a tapping at his window. When he opened, the Raven came in and sat in his palace above his window door. And he asked the Raven what his name was, and all he said was, "Nevermore." And then a memory came upon him, a scent or some kind of whiff of his lost love, Lenore. But the Raven said, "That is nevermore." He scolded the Raven. He wanted nothing to do with it. And he just asked the Raven, "Will you ever see his lost love, Lenore?" And the Raven quoth, "Nevermore." The final story that you might have heard of is the Telltale Heart. The Telltale Heart talks about a caretaker taking care of his patient. And in this, he never really had any problems with him, except for the pale blue eye he had that he hated, and that he was actually never considered mad, but actually had a disease over this eye of his patient. So every night he would go in the Telltale Heart, the caretaker would go into the patient's room and just watch him and plan his death. But the caretaker could never do it because he wasn't awake. But on the 8th night, after doing this, he walked into the victim's room, and the victim woke up when the caretaker came and smothered him until he heard, with his sharp sense of hearing, his stopping heart. The police came after he hid the body and told him that they heard a scream, and he said that the master that he was taking care of was on vacation. But really, he wasn't. He was actually dead. So in this, the caretaker invited him in to talk. And when they started talking, the caretaker had to hear the thump of a heart that he heard stop before, like boom, boom, boom. The caretaker was actually so convinced that he heard the heart, he told the cops where the body was and that he has actually killed his patient. And that's the 3 stories that he really wrote at that time, like I said, were the Masquerade of the Red Death, the Raven that made him so popular, and the Telltale Heart. There are many other stories, but this is just the 3 I'm going to talk about today. And after this, it actually leads to his tragic downfall after his lost love of Lenore, or Virginia. And this really started for Poe when one night when Virginia and him were actually singing together, and Virginia was singing and she actually coughed up blood. And this would, foreshadow from all the people that were dying, from his mother, his stepmother, and his actually brother died from tuberculosis, and Poe pleaded that this wouldn't be, but his prayers were never answered, because come to find out that Virginia actually contracted tuberculosis. And this really drove Poe mad. He really started drinking and falling into a downward spiral for many years. And this actually led to Poe's death. But before Poe's death, he was trying to find a maiden. Poe mad. He really started drinking and falling into a downward spiral for many years. And this actually led to Poe's death. But before Poe's death, he was trying to find a maiden, as you might say, because of his lost love and the death of his first cousin, Virginia. So he tried to find a maiden here and there, but his heart was never filled because of this downward spiral that he was going through. And when he actually found a maiden, or a wife to actually become his, it was too late. Poe was actually found on the streets of Baltimore 5 days where no one knew where he actually was. He was in the streets of Baltimore with not even the same clothes on his back, not even his clothes. From Poe being so poor, he only had one really jacket and one really outfit he had. And so when they found him, and when his actual clothes weren't on him, they knew something wasn't right. No one ever figured out why Poe was deaf. Some say it was because of rabies or alcoholism or some political act or riot at the time. No one knows what really happened to Poe, but he was left alone in the hospital to die forevermore. I really hope you enjoyed my presentation. I hope you learned a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe. And in this presentation, I'll just give you a recap. It talked about a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe and his early life, Edgar Allan Poe and some of his writings, and the fateful death that broke him by his lost love, Lenore. I hope that you continue to research about Edgar Allan Poe, maybe in your classes or just on your free time. Read some of his stories. They're always great for all this time of year. I hope that you enjoy my presentation, and I thank you so much for tuning in.